Nothing says fall quite like the smell of a fresh apple and the first sip of a crisp cider. But what if I told you that with just a few apples, some time, and a little bit of wild magic, you could make your own naturally fermented hard cider? No fancy yeast, no hard to find equipment, just two ingredients and nature doing its thing. This cider is tangy, a little bit funky, and packed with apple flavor that you just can't buy in a bottle. So grab your favorite apples and let's make some cider magic.
Ciders come in many forms. Personally, I like them crispy, dry, and full of unique flavors. Usually around this time, I'm whipping up my famous apple pie cider, or maybe a chai spiced pear cider, or there's always a bold, smoky bourbon cider. But today, we're not doing any of that. We're going funky and wild, just how our ancestors used to do it. And yes, before I move on, in the US, we call it hard cider, and everywhere else just calls it cider. I'll leave it to you to debate who is right in the comments. Anyway, people have been fermenting apples since the Egyptian times, if not even older. We're talking thousands of years ago. But yeast wasn't really identified until the 1850s. So how did those ancient Egyptians do it? Well, yeast is all around us, on just about everything we touch, including on the inside and outside of apples. And since apples are chock full of sugars, in particular fructose, glucose, and sucrose, that means they're highly fermentable. So basically, when an apple falls from a tree and starts to rot, in the right conditions, the yeast on the apple will turn the sugars into alcohol. So likely, animals and cavemen were consuming hard cider way before Egyptians were brewing it up. Today we're going to do the same, but in a much more controlled way. And all you need is some apple juice, a few fresh apples, and something to ferment in. The full recipe will be in the description, but today I'm just making 1 gallon of natural hard cider. But you can scale this up to any size you want. Let's start with the juice. Of course, if you have an abundance of apples at your disposal and a way to crush them and juice them, feel free to do that. All you need to do is collect the juice and let it ferment on its own, and you got hard cider. But I don't have all that stuff, so I'm taking a shortcut by buying apple juice. Any type works. I picked up Honeycrisp juice, since it's the best apple on earth. The only thing you need to watch out for are preservatives. Say it with me: sorbates, sulfites, and benzoates.
Oh yeah, and benzoates.
If you see those words on the bottle, skip it and find another one. Otherwise, you'll have a hard time fermenting it. It's totally okay if the bottle says something like vitamin C for preserving, or if it says preserved but doesn't have those preservatives written on it. That probably just means it was heat pasteurized to stop it from fermenting in the bottle. But don't worry, we're gonna add our own little microbes thanks to some apples. For apples, I'm again using Honeycrisp because, well, you know, it's the undisputed champ. Make sure to wash them good with soap and water to get any bad microbes off. I'm using about 5 apples. Chop them up, and you don't have to be precise on the size, just enough so there's plenty of surface area contact and a chance for those yeasties to break loose into the juice. As far as fermenters go, glass, stainless steel, or plastic work great. It just needs to have a lid and a way to let the air out during fermentation, either by cracking the lid or with an airlock like this. I'll be using my homemade fermenter, but if you buy apple juice in a gallon-sized jar, you can just pour a little bit out and add your apples into that. It might just be a little tough getting those apples out. So, I added the apples to a sanitized fermenter. It's super important to make sure everything that touches your juice and apples are sanitized from here on out for the cleanest fermentation. I use this food-grade, no-rinse sanitizer on all my fermentation projects, and I'll leave a link in the description if you need some. Otherwise, a good cleaning beforehand should do the trick in a pinch. I then followed the apples up with the juice. An optional but recommended ingredient is yeast nutrient. This helps the yeast work a little better, but you can totally skip this. I have some from my other fermented projects, and it always comes in handy. So I'm just going to add a dash of Fermaid. Now just close up the fermenter and add an airlock. All that's left to do is wait. So I set the fermenter in a warm area to let it do its magic. But before it gets going, in order to know how much alcohol we might get out of this, we'll need to take a specific gravity reading, which tells us the sugar content. Usually that's done with a hydrometer, but that's the old school way of doing it. And since everything so far has been old school, let's take it to the future with this video sponsor, Anton Paar. This is the Easy Dens by Anton Paar, a digital smart hydrometer that precisely measures sugar content and helps track your readings. Sometimes it can be frustrating when you're using a regular hydrometer and refractometer. It's hard to get exact measurements and you feel like you're kind of guessing with the readings. But with the Easy Dens, you get instant, super accurate readings of the gravity, all just from a few drops of liquid, meaning less waste and no more conversion calculators. First, pull a sample of your liquid and inject it into the Easy Dens. Then connect it to your phone via Bluetooth and open the app. Once in, you can take a measurement with a click of a button and get the reading in seconds. Looks like this cider is starting out with an original gravity of 1.048. The app also logs your readings and will even calculate alcohol content for you once you collect more readings. So, if you want to take your home brewing to the professional level, check out the Anton Paar Easy Dens. I'll drop a link in the description, and trust me, once you try it, you'll never go back to a regular hydrometer again. Thank you to Anton Paar for the partnership, and now, back to the fermentation. As I mentioned, I left this someplace warm, which happened to get quite warm, all the way up to almost 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and that seemed to help this fermentation along, as it was bubbling after just 2 days. I let it keep going for a total time of 2 weeks. At which point the bubbling had stopped and the airlock levels had kind of leveled out. So it was time to bottle up. Real quick, before bottling, I took another gravity reading with the Easy Dens. I wasn't really sure what to expect, but I was shocked to see that this fermented down to 1.001, which means using no yeast and just relying on what's on the apples, this hard cider is 6.2%. Now we can bottle. I'm using my favorite pressure-rated fermentation bottles. I did a bunch of experimenting in my natural soda video, and these were the best I found. So I'll leave a link in the description if you need some, they're great. But just as a reminder, don't use decorative glass bottles for this. Recently I had a commenter say they used something from Container Store, and it ended up exploding, so please be careful. For the ones I have, each one holds about 1 liter, so I should be able to fill 3 or more of these. Oh, and let's real quick take a peek inside to make sure there aren't any nasty microbes floating around. Thankfully, nothing of concern, but if you see anything black, green, or fuzzy, do not continue. Toss it and start again. Sometimes that just happens, but thankfully apples can have some acidity, so that helps with bad microbe growth. Okay, finally, I bottled them up. It helps to have a little spigot on your fermenter, otherwise you might need to auto siphon or just carefully pour into the bottles. Remember to leave about 1 inch or so of headroom if you plan to carbonate these. I overfilled mine slightly, so I just poured some out. Speaking of carbonation, I wasn't sure how much residual sugars will be left for a second fermentation, so I decided to add a small glug of maple syrup to restart the fermentation in the bottle. You could also use a bit of fresh apple juice. This will give us a sparkling cider, but if you like it still, then you can just stop here and enjoy. Once they were filled, I closed the lids. I like a bit of fizz, so I let them sit on the counter for another few days. Burping on day 2, which is just releasing the lid to let off any excess pressure, and when I did, I saw some activity, so I closed them and threw them in the fridge overnight. And the next day, I was finally able to enjoy these naturally fermented ciders.
Okay, here's the bottle. It looks really good, so let's pop it open and see. Ooh, nice little pop there. It looks just like the Honeycrisp juice, but certainly smells a little different. All right, here we are. Several weeks into this experiment. I've never done anything like this before where I just use the apples to ferment cider, so I'm very excited to see how this is. I haven't sneaked any tastes, so I have no idea what it's gonna be like, but I am very excited to try it out. So cheers, let's give it a taste. Whoa, that is really good. That's very like tart, much more tart than I expected, but not overly tart. It's not like sour or anything. But even though it fermented dry, there still is a little bit of this like underlying sweetness. And I would say very much an apple flavor coming through. A lot of times with other ciders I've made, the apple flavor kind of disappears. I think because of the fermentation and it ferments so dry down to below 1.0, often the apple flavor is gone. And that usually lends well to like other flavors when I add it in. But since this is just straight apple, this is giving a ton of that flavor. Also with a lot of other ciders I've done where it's just apple juice, the final product, because it is so dry, is also very thin. And this has a very full mouthfeel. It tastes like basically pulverized apples with a bit of funk and a bit of tartness. I absolutely love how this turned out. It's not overly funky by any means. I think anyone that likes apple juice or cider, as we call it here in the States, I think you would love this. You wouldn't even know on drinking this that it has alcohol. I don't taste any alcohol. It just tastes like a unique cider. What really makes this unique, of course, is the way that it's fermented. Because we use the natural yeast and bacteria on the apple skins and the apples, this is actually technically probiotic. It's kind of like a mix between kombucha and hard cider, which I guarantee you won't be able to find anywhere in the store. So the only way you're going to be able to try this is to make your own. And remember that each batch is unique. The yeast that I had accessible to me on the apples that I used might be different and will likely be different than the one that you use. So don't expect the exact same results that I got. Yours will be similar, but just a little bit different and more unique to you. That's the beauty of natural fermentation and why I love it. Not every batch is going to be a winner, but in this case, this one is definitely a winner. So let me know if you're going to make this one this fall. I think this is a perfect beginner fermentation project or just a side project that you have going in your kitchen in the background. I don't think you'll regret making this at all, and it was so easy. And if you do make it, let me know what kind of twist you'll make to it. Are you going to use Granny Smith apples or some other kind of apple? How would you make this even better? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and special thank you to the channel members that make weird experiments like this possible. I hope you have an amazing fall, and stay tuned for next week. I got a special video coming just in time for Halloween. But if this cider recipe didn't quench your thirst, don't worry. I got another one queued up right here. Check it out. I think you're gonna like it. Cheers.